Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dice Tower. My name is Z Garcia.
I'm Camilla.
And I'm Mike Delisio.
Today we are talking about Nova Era, as you can see right here, a new game from Simon Games, which is a Civ style game, at least in spirit.
In theme.
In theme, for sure.
In theme, right?
Yeah.
It takes a Civ concept and translates that into a sort of a boiled down, very straightforward, mostly sort of card-driven and combo-driven system that is going to get in there, do its stuff, and get back out in a much shorter time frame than usual Civ games.
Right.
With a lot less going on also, rules-wise. So let's go ahead and take a look at how it works. I'll show you in an overview what is happening, some of the moving parts in it. We'll come on back after that. We'll tell you what we think of it. The game's going to be played over 3 eras, tracked up there in the era track, and then there's also a scoring after the third in each of those, and then we transition from era 1 to era 2 to era 3. The backs of these cards are tied to the era you are playing, so we will replace and clean all this and then set it up with another deck of cards, and then another for the third. Here we're taking a look at a game for 2 players, okay? Every time you have one of those scoring phases, players are going to be scoring for their personalities. They're going to be scoring points for having different kinds of cards out here, and also for having majorities of cards in each of those places. There are a couple of these player aids, and I'll be using this to explain to you how we are going through these phases. We're not going to be drilling down too much into these phases. This is very much an overview, just to give you a flow and an idea. There's also some iconography on the back of this card. So let's go ahead and leave that. Let's put it over here for now. How about that? Right there. So we begin up here with the rolling of the dice. Someone is the start player. They have a token here. To remind you, some phases are played clockwise and some are played counterclockwise. So we are going to grab 3 dice, roll them, and put them on each of these plates. One more than the number of players. So we're going to do that. Those go there. And then a third time. And those are going to go there. Now the players are going to draft one of those sets. This right here is my player area, but each player would have their own. You begin with an unrest track set to 0, and then these different resources, you begin with 1 in each of those 4 different resources. So now we are going to draft these. I'm going to start, and let's say I take these right here. When I take them, they're going to go right here, and I'm going to check that the total is not above 10. If it is above 10, then I have to take unrest equal to however much above 10 I am. So say, for example, if I had taken this instead, I get 6 unrest, shooting me all the way up here. Pretty bad, because you're going to be having some negative effects happen. And then let's say the other player at the table, they take this, okay? And now we are going to check the one that did not get taken, and it's going to affect our disaster tracks. These are the disaster tracks over here. They are color-coded to the different things, and so the decline is going to go, there's 5 on that die, so it goes all the way up to 5. And then we've got regression, that goes to 5, and dark age, that goes all the way up to 6. These can now go away, back in the bag. Next up, we are going to be checking for Dark Age, if the Dark Age was triggered. So we've picked dice, we have advanced the disaster tracks. If this one makes it all the way down here, then some bad stuff's going to happen. We all lose a die, and then the rest that we have, they go down by 1 to a minimum of 1, okay? That did not happen, so we are still good. And we move on to the next phase, which is the meat of the game, really spending dice. This is going to happen counterclockwise around the table. So the order changes. In a 2-player game, not as noticeable, but with more players, of course, you're going the other way around. And so there are a bunch of different actions you can take that are going to get you resources, get you these cards in your hand, let you play cards from your hand or from here, do a variety of things. And we'll be going over those things in just a second. Once that's all done, and we have spent all 3 of our dice, then we are going to check for disasters, and that's right here. We are going to see if any of these 4 have made it to the bottom. Now, don't forget, Dark Age already happened. We check for that one immediately, but these we check afterwards. You have 1 round to see it coming. We would check for that. If any of these made it to the bottom, let's say decline, then we have to lose something here. Either flip a card face down or get rid of one entirely, okay? And then we are going to trigger any cards that have a production symbol. That's the gear right there. Some cards you'll see have a little gear on them. Anything that shows that in our civilization over here, we're going to trigger that ability. After that, we are going to clean up. If it's a scoring phase, we are going to score. And then we go back to rolling the dice and drafting new dice. So let's go back to this part right here, spending the dice, and talk about what you can use these for. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these for the sake of space. I'm also going to move this out of here and scoot my board up. Don't forget, everybody has one of these with their own dice right there. So the first thing you can do is you can develop a technology, and that can come from your hand or it can come from the display. You begin with a couple of starting cards in your hand right here so you can spend them. Every card is going to have a color, and you are going to play it into that column. So let's say, for example, that I want to play this card. I have to spend a die to play every card. If that die happens to match the color, then it reduces the cost I would have to pay with resources from this printed cost, okay? This one is in red. It is a 3. If I spend a 3 die that's red, or better, 4 or 5 red, then I pay nothing. If I spend some other color, then I pay for that, okay? So I cannot play this card right now. It costs 3 in red. I have no red dice. I have 1 single resource. I can't afford this one. Besides playing from my hand, though, I could play from the display, but you can only play the bottom card of each of these columns. So right now available to all the players are these 4 cards right here. Once this one's gone, then this becomes available, and it would be these 4 that are available, okay? So this one over here, it's 4 in blue, medicine. I could afford this because I can spend this die to play it. And in fact, it covers the entirety of the cost. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I would put it over here, and I would spend a die. Now, again, every action costs you a die, whether that die helps or not. That's one of the things you have to spend is a die. So I've now gathered medicine. That could be my turn. Play a card from my hand or from the display. Now it would be my opponent's turn. They have their own board with their own dice. These right here are the ones they took, and they could do another action. So another action you can do is you can spend a die to take the matching resources. My opponent could spend this 3 in yellow to take these 3 yellow matching resources and add them to their own board right there under the economic space. And that's one of the actions you could do. So let's say they do that. They get rid of that die, it goes back in the bag, and they take some resources. It comes back to me, and one of the actions I could do is enlist a personality. So over here, we've got different personalities. They were randomly put out at the beginning of the era here, and they are based on the number of players. So 4 of these for 2 players. These are available. There's no grid or anything like over here. They're all 4 available to whichever player wants to take them. And then you have to spend a black die to take these, okay? These work a little bit like the other cards. This one, for example, over here shows the symbol for personalities, shows a number 4. If I spend this 4 on it, I will take this card and I will put it right here where personalities go. It'll tell me either something it does immediately or some scoring or something it does, right? However, if I spend it on, let's say I instead want to hire somebody who is 3, and I spend this 4, it would actually lower my unrest. I'm already at the bottom, so it would not matter. But let's say I'm here, and I spend the 4 on that. I'm overspending. This would back off 1. The opposite is also true. If I want to hire this person, and I want to spend only that die, then I would go up by 2, because it's 1, 2, 3 right here. And again, you cannot combine these dice. Every action is 1 die. You have to spend 1 die. You can only hire personalities with black dice. I could not do this with one of the other colors. All right. So going back to my example here, let's say I do Confucius. I spend this one, and Confucius cost me 3, so I'm good. It immediately gives me 1 victory point, it says. I would go over here and give myself a victory point. And then it says I may discard Confucius to flip any one of my dice. That means I discard him entirely. and I take this and flip it to the opposite side. Pretty good. He's going to stick around for the entirety of this era. So I have him for a few more rounds, okay? We go back to my opponent, who is going to take a different action. These are their dice. They're going to reserve a card. This is something you can do. They discard any die with any value, and they take one of the available cards and put that in their hand. So let's say they get rid of this, goes away, they take this card that they cannot afford now, or they want to make sure I don't get, and they put that in their hand. Only a couple of actions remain. You can spend a die that's black, whatever the value may be, to lower your unrest by 1. Maybe not very efficient, but sometimes you need to do that. You can also get one of these territories, expand territory. These are cards that show up in later eras. This is from Era 2. It's going to be purple. They go right here in territories. The cost for these is a little bit different. You need to have specific cards face up in front of you. So 2 red, 1 green, 1 yellow. You could take this from the display, assuming again it's available, and put it right there. Do whatever it says. Now notice I said face up, okay? Let's put a couple more cards out here like this. I say face up because, and this is not something I could play right now, sometimes the cards are going to be damaged, okay? That might happen from these disasters or from various other things. If something is damaged, you flip it face down. That will not count for anything while it is face down, but there's another action you can do, which is spend any die to recover and sort of fix up to 2 cards anywhere that are face down. So you spend a die, flip this back over, and it counts again. Now, at the end of the era, after 3 rounds in the era, you are going to score. And let's say I have this card right here. This card, by the way, you can see you can pay with green or yellow, but only one of those 2. And if you pay in green, it goes in the green stack. If you play with yellow, it goes in the yellow stack. So at the end, everybody's going to get 1 victory point for every color that they have. So I get 1, I get 2, nothing there, 3, nothing there. We're not counting personalities for this. They do their own thing. And then you're also going to get a point. So I would get 3 for that, right? 1, 2, 3. You also get a point if you have the most in a color against everybody else. So let's say I have 2 green and the most anybody else has is 1. I get another point for that. Let's say I lose to red. None of these, so I'll probably lose. And let's say I tied somebody in blue. Neither of us gets it, right? So that's how that works. You're going to also deal with the personalities if you have any scoring. And then you move on to the next era, where we get rid of any cards that are left. These are not replenished while you play during the round. Any personality goes into the past over here. And then we are going to check some cards have a little banner right here. And they say the title of an upcoming card, in this case, Cavalry. So you go to this deck that goes from stage 1 to stage 2, and you find the matching card, Cavalry. And you give it to the person who has this card in front of them. It has to be built, okay? But if I happen to have this, then I have this card given to me and it goes into my hand, meaning I could build it later on. Now, there's also cards later on in the game that do something that's kind of the reverse of that. They put things into obsolescence. And so some cards, when they're built, they say, find these other cards and replace them. They are gone. They are forgotten by history. And so if you have one of those cards built or you're holding it in your hand, you remove it entirely from the game. So there you go. You do that 3 times. At the end of the game, you're also going to get victory points for having a bunch of resources left. And we see who's got the most points down here. And that, of course, is the winner. So that is generally the flow of the game, an overview of how it goes. Let's go ahead and go back up top. So this is a game I was originally really excited about, and partly that's because I love the look of the game, but also the designer is the same person who co-designed Marvel United.
Yes.
And he's done a few other things, honestly, some of which have not been that interesting. And I should probably take his name on the cover with a little bit of a grain of salt. But this is one that looked like it would be something I would enjoy. And it kind of took me on a journey, to be fair. You know what I mean? This is a game that I think we're all going to agree here has some flaws, and they're not even that well hidden. They're fairly apparent flaws. But But there are other things which I was not expecting it to do that I think it does do pretty well, okay? Let's focus on those things that we didn't like. Let's just lay it out there, start with the stuff we didn't like.
Okay.
And the big one for me is I think this game doesn't scale very well. I think the game has some issues with scalability where at 2 players, the back and forth feels good. The meanness feels fine because if you're picking on someone, you're basically helping yourself. That works out well.
Okay.
The weird turn structure doesn't matter. And then as you add more players, all of that compounds. You do one phase clockwise, the other phase counterclockwise, but any things you need to resolve during the counterclockwise phase still resolve clockwise. You're like, okay.
Yeah.
And the meanness and the, hey, who's got this card? Wreck it. You know what I mean? It just feels very different in a multiplayer game, I thought.
Yeah, and I made a little note here that I think this game is going to be polarizing. You have to know what you're getting into before you play it. I think you're doing a disservice to new players, unless you're all learning the game for the first time. But if you're teaching this game, you know it, and you're teaching it to new players, you really should give them some caveats. I really believe that. Number one, can be mean. Like you just said.
It can feel very bad.
This can be mean, and it can feel punishing.
Yeah.
Depending upon the timing of the die rolls, the values on the dice that can trigger different disasters that could either, flip cards over that you've built. You have to be aware that in theme, it's a civilization game, but also in the idea of potentially negative progression, it's a civilization game too. Usually, the shorter Civ games don't have the destruction of things that you've built. This does, 100%, especially when you get into the third and final era. It's 3 eras. Cards that you've built are going away.
Yes.
There's no question about it. They're going away, and you have to be okay with that. If you don't like a game where you've built something up over several turns going away, then you're probably going to have a problem with it.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like it's more than that. I feel like in the first round, if that hits you hard in the first round because you haven't built into those things that can ruin or those negative events that trigger, if you're ruined in the first round, there really is not a coming back from that. This is one that it says 60 minutes on the box. I think maybe in a 2-player game, I haven't played it 2 players, but I don't see this being under an hour and a half. And you're sitting there for an hour of that knowing you're not in the game. And of course, you're still playing, you're still doing your best and trying to play logically, but it has a very negative loop. If you get caught in that I guess kind of turmoil loop, or destruction loop, it is really hard or not possible to recover from that, it feels like.
Yeah, there is an interesting thing that is actually a part of the game that I like, which is the dice drafting, where sometimes you get stuck making a suboptimal choice of dice so you don't get wrecked, right? Because it really is somewhat player driven as far as what calamities are going to occur.
Right.
But there are some times where it's like, okay, well, so I don't get hit with this disaster, I'm going to take these dice that knock me way over into my, unrest, and they're not even really dice that synergize with the cards I have or the cards on the table. So there is that possibility. I don't think it's going to be an every game thing, and I think, honestly, in a 2-player game, it's much less of an issue. It just is.
Right.
Sure.
But that is something to be aware of.
Right. Or with that, you say you take the dice for a suboptimal turn, and sometimes that is so it doesn't trigger. I can't remember what those tracks are called. They're not unrest. The disasters.
Yeah.
Just so you don't trigger that, which almost gives it like a semi-co-op feel, and it doesn't feel good to take this optimal turn so you don't trigger these disasters, so that nobody triggers those disasters. So a lot of your turns feel, I want to say almost all of them feel like, which is my lesser of 2 evil choices?
Well,
do I take the lesser dice and have a crappy turn because I have 1s and 2s and maybe a couple 3, or maybe a 3, something like that, and pretty much just waste my turn? so that we don't trigger these disasters? Or do I just let them trigger? And I know they're going to wreck me, but they'll also wreck you guys a little bit as well. But you have the cards you can turn upside down. I don't, because last turn I got completely wiped out. So it definitely has this negative feel loop where it's almost touches on semi-cooperative. The semi-cooperative is really what hurts me least.
And that is a bigger issue in a higher player count game, because in a 2-player count, someone's got to be one of you is going to be the one to make that decision every time to what's the last 3 dice that are going to be left over. In a 3 or 4-player game, all of the anxiety is on one person, right? If you're the last person to choose the dice between the 2 leftover spots, you're the one with all the pressure from the other players around the table. Are you going to hit us with a bunch of,
bad stuff?
Right, yeah.
Stuff. So it feels worse in a higher player count game. In a 2-player game, each player is going to have to make that decision multiple times.
Right. Well, then maybe it kind of fits more of that 1v1, tug of war, push and pull, kind of you're seeing directly how that's affecting in a multiplayer. But again, this isn't listed as a 2-player game. It's listed as 2 to 4.
Sure.
That's one of the player counts that you're saying that doesn't feel bad in. So I think it's good to know that 2/3 of the time with the player counts, it's a real issue.
Yeah, I don't know if I would. It's again, I'm not sure I agree with you that it's a big issue, but I agree that it feels worse with more players, and that is compounded by turn order mumbo jumbo. And that goes away in a 2-player game.
Does.
It simply does. The game it's shorter, it's less fiddly, it's more head-to-head and direct, as opposed to randomly evil in a 2-player game.
Yeah.
Like all the problems, whether you're saying they're big issues, I'm thinking I consider them to be smaller issues, not non-issues, but smaller issues. My point being, they kind of all go away with 2 players.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess I shouldn't say big issues. I want to say how impactful they are, because to me it's an issue. I don't like that. I don't like that negative turn loop that you get stuck in. So I think, issues is my word, but it probably is just how much it affects and how much it comes to play into the game. Because maybe if you do like that, it's not an issue.
Right.
Well, there are some good things in the game, though.
There's a lot of good things.
Yeah,
I do want to mention one last bad thing, though, before we get to good things, and that is I find the scoring in this game to just be kind of boring.
It's not terribly dynamic.
Scoring is kind of lame.
Yeah.
It's like you have a color, you get a point. You have the most of that color, 1 more point.
Yeah.
Even the personalities that are cool, and I think they're neat, they're still kind of flat. The scoring in this game's a little flat. It's a little like meh. Playing the game, I find a lot more fun than scoring the game.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
I agree.
Okay.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about playing the game. Let's talk about that dice drafting start right there. I think that is fun. I love the idea of you roll 3 dice, and those dice are going to, you draft 3. They are 90% of what you're going to be able to do is what you take there. And I love that it's so dynamic. You can spend them to buy a car. You can spend them to take the resource.
Yep.
You can get this personality. You can get a territory that brings you landmass, but also uncertainty and a little, chaos into your world. It's so... I love that there's a lot of Civ-type stuff shoved in here in a small package.
And it also fixes the problem that is often found when you're doing dice drafting of higher values being strictly better.
Yes.
Because they are better in this game. 100%, a 6 is better than a 2.
Right.
However, if the total number value of the pips is over 10, you're getting better dice, but you've got an unrest track. You're upsetting your people, and that could be very punishing. So you really have to balance that and maybe get cards that help to mitigate that a little bit. But that's a really smart way of keeping high-value dice valuable, but also making them potentially dangerous. Very smart.
And it also doesn't take away from it doesn't make the lower value dice useless, because all it costs is a die to play a card.
Right.
And if that's not going to the pips play into the color you're playing or not enough, then you
Right.
can supplement it,
Sure.
with the tokens you have. Or just to reserve a card, it just takes a die.
Yep.
Right.
And so it doesn't mean that I only have ones, I can do nothing with them. They do still have value. Or even a 6. I mean, if you just discard a black die, you get to take your unrest down 1. Yeah, it might be a 6. You don't get to go down 6, though.
Right.
So I do think that there's a good balance there, and it is really interesting to have those multi-use dice. You can do a lot of different things with them, and it really drives your turn.
Yeah, there's a real, after you do that dice drafting, then come in the actions, and there's a real interesting economy of actions at play here, in which you can use a die to take a card. You put that card in your hand. Later, you can play a die to pay that card. That costs you 2 actions. If you had been able to play it from the table, that's 1 action. And there's not that many things, right? You're doing 3 dice 3 times per era, which is also 3 times. That's it, right? I really like that economy of actions. I like the flexibility, but also the pressure you're feeling. You're going, ooh, we're scoring in 2 rounds. We're scoring next round.
Yep.
You better get these things in order. Things decaying or, being damaged. They're okay to stay face down unless they give you some passive income.
Right.
By the time you get to scoring, you better bring that stuff back up. That's costing you dice. I really find the design here to be very tight. I was going to say small, but sort of condensed.
Yeah.
It's a fairly straightforward game to teach.
Really
There's a couple of fiddly things, but it's generally straightforward.
I think I'd push back that there's a couple fiddly things. I mean, I think that the rules are quite fiddly in if you do this card and it comes into your tableau, everyone needs to check for this other type of card, and if it's there, it goes face down, that kind of stuff. I've yet to play a game where that's remembered consistently through the game. I mean, there's always at least one, usually 2 or 3 take-backs. Like, oh, whoops, I forgot to play this. Does anyone have that? Oh, hold on. Let's look for this card. Everyone look for it real quick. Did you have it at that time? Did you not? I mean, there's a lot of these little things that just don't come smoothly, I think, even after a couple plays.
It's funny because that's an element of my absolute favorite part of the game. I do agree that can be a little bit of a put on the brakes. Everyone check who has archery. Does anyone have archery?
Yeah.
Put it in the past. But the card progression system is by far my favorite part of this game. I absolutely love that when you get a card in one era, certain cards, not every card has them, certain cards have a better version of itself that you don't pay for, that you don't have to wonder if you're going to get it. Because so often what happens is, in games like this, when there's a better version of a card you already get, you still have to be able to get that card out of the deck, and you have to be able to pay for it. In this one, no.
Well, it goes in your hand. You still pay for it. But
I guess
you're guaranteed evolution.
You're guaranteed to having a chance to play that card.
Yeah.
I think
you are
great.
not going out for everybody.
Right. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. I think it's a great part of the game.
Yeah.
I just think the implementation of it is quite fiddly. I don't know if it's just not being obvious enough on the card or what, but it's a rule that gets in the way of the game, pumps the brakes, we forget, all kinds of things.
Honestly, I think it's mostly a graphic design issue. They're basically either an up pyramid or a down pyramid. I think it should be much more obvious when cards are destroyed versus when you're upgrading them.
Okay, sure.
They're in the same spot on the card.
Yeah.
It's simply
sort of, but
kind of.
Kind of, but I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think it's a being careful while you play thing.
Right, it is.
And again, I think at the end of the day, this game is undermined by itself because the game presents, looks, says it's a quick, fun romp of a game.
And to be fair, it reads like that.
Yeah.
The rule book even reads like that.
It reads like that.
Right.
It is a Civ game. So playing it willy-nilly then looks sloppy, I think. Like the game then comes across like, oh, it's such a weird rule and so mean and so sloppy. It's like, no, it's the lens position that needs adjusting. If you look at it from the other side, it's a punchy, pretty Civ game with not that many things to check for. Because normally, there's a lot of stuff you're checking for if you're playing a Civ game.
Right.
That's the point. I think they're undermining themselves with the game looking so cute.
Yeah.
I love the look, don't get me wrong.
I do too.
But I think a lot of people coming to this game are going to go, good night, this is mean and a little hard to remember. And what is happening?
Which is a Civ game.
But it's because it's
that's what Civ games usually are.
Yeah, that's sort of how I feel about it. I understand that those things can be forgotten. I didn't find it to be any more egregious in this game than any of the last 5 games we've played. You know what I mean? Where you forget stuff. Yes.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys want to talk about? Or can we jump into some final thoughts here?
I'm good with it.
All right, I'll start, I guess. I like this game. I have obvious issues with it, as I already said, but especially add 2, and I get to choose that if I want to keep playing it at 2, I guess. I like it. I wish that I would love a second edition for them to tighten up a few things. The turn order thing, draft
Agreed.
this way, but play cards this way. I understand why, but there's got to be a better way to implement that. The symbols for what upgrades versus what gets you a new card in your hand or versus what destroys and decays or makes something obsolete. There's got to be a cleaner way for that to be graphically presented on the cards. But I enjoy it's a game that even while I'm scoring, I'm kind of like, the scoring's a little basic, but I like playing the game.
Yeah, I like the actual playing.
I really do. Drafting dice, seeing what I've got. Ooh, I can have access to that, or I can combo these little things. Ooh, I can get Julius Caesar over here. Okay, great. I like it. I'm going to give this one a 7.5. I wish it was a little better, and certainly wanting it to like it so much when I saw it and heard about it. But my disappointing, the part of me being disappointed, and I am in many ways disappointed, settles it to a 7.5. It would have been much higher without those issues. So there you go. That's it for me.
I think this is the game that declines quickly for me. I think every time I play it, I go in, whether it's I've read the rule book and I'm excited about what it sounds like. It's bringing some of my favorite mechanisms in it. Drafting, multi-use dice, tableau building with special powers, kind of, building your empire here, right? And every game I go in, I probably start at like an 8, and then it's like a little bit into it, 7. But without fail, every time, it's just like a hard decline. So I'm coming in at a 4 on this. It is one that I have no desire to ever touch again. And honestly, I was thinking about even going significantly lower than that. But because I do like so much of the mechanisms that are in this game, it's not that it necessarily feels mean. It just feels like a negative game. It feels like you're fighting against each other. It feels like you're fighting against the game. A good turn is one that's neutral. And that's the best turn. There's never a turn where you feel like, man, that was good. Oh, yes, perfect dice. I did that. You never feel like you solved the puzzles of what to do with this dice that you do and you built up something. It just feels like, whew, I broke even. I didn't get hurt this turn. Oh, good. We're not going into a disaster, something like that. So for me, the game just is very negative, and it feels negative. And my fun value is extremely low in this game. I'm very ambivalent on the look of it. I know you guys both like it. I think it's fine. It's not my
really
style
like
of
it.
art.
I like
Yeah,
the
I know
look,
you guys
yeah.
have both said that multiple times. I find it. If you like stuff like Life in Runeterra, things like that, it's very reminiscent of that. But I also don't care for that look. So for me, it's just a game that every time I play it, it is a pretty quick decline into just not fun. And if you get hosed that first round, just make some popcorn and enjoy the next hour and a half. And I disagree. I do think that the game gets in its own way of the fun and the fiddly nature of the rules and what did we forget and what is this? Everything just feels not very clean. It's just also not clean. So so for me it's a 4.
Yeah, and it comes back to it's going to be polarizing, right?
Right, very much so. Very much.
Because not discounting your experience at all, I've had many turns where I felt like I nailed that. I had this great turn. I've also had turns where it's like, well, I guess I'm getting resources because there's nothing else I really can do.
Sure.
So, but the fact that you've had that experience means that other people are going to have that experience.
Yeah.
And so this is not going to be a game for everybody. It just isn't. For me, the way I did it, maybe it's a little bit of a cop-out, but I'm doing it. I don't care, is that for a multiplayer, this game is a 6. For a 2-player game, it's an 8. So I'm giving it a 7.
Got it right in the middle.
Sure. Okay, that's the way I approached it because I feel like it presents pretty different experiences with 2 and with the other player counts.
Okay.
I do feel like it feels longer, too long in 3 and 4 player. 2 player, it feels perfect, right? Any of the real issues I have kind of go away with 2 player. And so that's why, it'd be almost close to an 8.5 2 player. Like it'd be closer to that than to a 7.5.
Sure.
So I'm coming in at a 7. I think that I agree with Z. If they did choose to come out with a second edition where they address some of these, this is a game I could consider excellent. It's just not there right now.
Right.
So it's a little frustrating.
It is very frustrating. Yeah. Having a game you're excited about be close to what you want it to be or what you're imagining it to be, that can be frustrating.
Yeah.
As it is right now, it's one that I look forward to continuing to explore, add to players.
Right.
Knowing some of those pitfalls and explaining them very clearly if I'm teaching to someone for the first time.
Right.
Hey, the game's mean. Some stuff's going to go away during the third era. Obsolescence is a real thing. Be careful with this. You're good with that? You understand what's going on? Let's try it.
Yeah.
So there you go. That is Nova Era, everybody. That is a seal of approval from us here at the Dice Tower. Thank you very much for tuning in and watching this one with us. Let us know in the comments below if this is one you're excited about or if you've played it, what you thought of it. That's going to do it. My name is Z Garcia.
I'm Camilla.
I'm Mike Delisio.
We'll see you on the next one. Watch out for obsolescence.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you like this review or whatever you just watched, wasn't it amazing? Check out our channel, Dice Tower. We have all kinds of things. We review games, we do top 10s, we play games live. It's all about board games, but especially the people who play them. Check out Dice Tower YouTube channel.